Hello Like a Boss fam, welcome back to another episode with me, Lauren. Today we are talking all about building resilience because we are so close to the end of semester. You can practically smell it in the air. That of course could be the rain, which has been falling all day today. But to me at least, you know, the encroaching winter and the cold also brings about that end of semester feeling. But that feeling is also often very associated with stress because we have lots of assignments building up where we're starting to think about, how we're going to manage all of these mounting tasks that we have. And that's bad enough at the best of times, let alone in a situation like we're currently finding ourselves in. A few weeks ago, I spoke to Dr. Lydia Woodyatt about how we can manage stress by understanding what stress is, how it affects our mind and our body, and some simple strategies that can help us manage stress in the long term. And this week, we're talking about this topic again because it's super important. I'm heading back to campus next week, and I have to admit that while part of me is really excited to leave my house and get back to some sort of normality, part of me is really anxious about this change because I know that the world that I'm going to be back into is not the same as the world that I left. We all have to adapt to the new normal, but this is confronting. I don't really know what this means for myself or my friends or my family, and while I'm relieved that we're really doing very well as a state and as a country, I'm still anxious about how I and those around me are going to bounce back from this. So I asked Dr. GARETH FURBER, who you've all heard me talk about many times before, to give us some tips and some guidance about a really important subject, resilience.
Hi Lauren, and Like a Boss viewers, my name's Gareth. I work in health counselling disability services. Just recently moved into my new digs around me. I strangely have a sliding kind of garage door as an entry point to my office, which is a little weird, but we'll go with it. I also apologise for the slightly goofy headset, but over the last couple of months this has become kind of like my almost like my safety blanket that I wear for videos and teleconferences. So I've become quite familiar with it, and the microphone works well. So resilience is essentially kind of the ability to cope with and adapt to and bounce back from setbacks. And whilst I'd love to guarantee or promise people that they won't experience adversity or setbacks in their life, they will. It's kind of just part of being a human being. This raises the question, I guess, of how good are we at dealing with these setbacks, which might range from just the frustrations of everyday life through to bigger losses or failures that we encounter at some point in time in our life. And how we respond to or how we bounce back from that adversity is partially governed by what we call our resilience level. So you probably know people, some people who you think cope really well with setbacks, seem to kind of know what to do and how to respond during times of distress. And then you probably know other people who don't necessarily cope with adversity well, who seem to get derailed at even the smallest or slightest kind of stressful event. Now the question is, can we build resilience over time? So, or is it fixed? Like, is the level, how resilient you are now, is that just how resilient you're going to be for the rest of your life? Now that question I've sort of posed to multiple mental health professionals and colleagues over my times, and the general view is that yes, you can build resilience. You can get more resilient over time, but it requires kind of training. And I liken that to weight training. For example, if you want to get big and strong, physically strong, you're going to need to weight train. And it's going to need to be purposeful and effortful. And it's sort of the same with if you want to be more mentally strong, you're going to need to train. But we're not necessarily taught how to train our minds or how to train ourselves to be mentally strong. So I thought I'd outline a few ways that people can start training themselves mentally in order to increase their levels of resilience. So the first thing is base level good habits. So you're probably sick of hearing this by now, but eating a good diet, getting regular physical activity, and good quality and the right amount of sleep are kind of like a foundation for physical and mental health. And I'd probably add maybe a meditative or meditation practice to that as well. We're all biological organisms, and how well we look after our biology will dictate how capable we are of withstanding stress of a physical or mental nature in the future. Second is to get used to deploying different kinds of coping strategies for different types of setbacks. So if something happens to you, a problem, and you think it's fixable, then you need to deploy as much of your resources as you can towards fixing the problem itself, finding a solution. And if you don't know how, then it's about finding the right people who can teach you how. But if a setback is not something that's fixable, it's not something that's reversible in any way, then you might need to deploy different kinds of coping strategies. For example, we might talk about emotion-focused coping, which is dealing with the emotional impact of something that's happened to us. We talk about meaning making, which is to look at something that's happened to us and try and extract from it maybe some positives or a silver lining or something that we can take away so that that event is not just a negative event in our memory. Or we might have to look at kind of cognitive strategies, which means taking a different perspective on the problem and seeing whether taking a different perspective can help us adapt to or cope with what has happened. The third strategy is something I call mental rehearsal. This is something that sports psychologists would recommend to sports people, to elite athletes. And what you're going to do is you're going to mentally rehearse how you're going to cope with known stresses. So as a student, there are a bunch of stressful events in your life that you can actually predict. Right, exams, the due dates of assignments, when you go out on placements, you know those events are coming up, you know when they're coming up, and you know there's a high likelihood they're going to be stressful in some way, shape or form. So what you do is you mentally rehearse how it is you think you're going to cope with that. How will you spend your days? What changes might you make to your daily routine? What kind of things might you remind yourself at the time to help you deal with the fact that there is stress in that situation. And this is the same as, like I said, athletes mentally rehearsing what they'll do in a final or in the final competition. And they can run through scenarios in their head and pick ones that they think are the best way of adapting, the best way of performing. The fourth one I'll talk about is financial literacy and confidence. So I'm very mindful of the fact that when you're a university student, you don't typically have great amounts of money. It's not about wealth building per se, it's more about feeling confident with the money that you have. So start developing good habits around budgeting, around saving, investing if you can. I see frequently the fact that those who feel a little more comfortable in their financial situation are able to withstand setbacks a bit more because they don't have to worry too much about providing the basics, food and shelter and things like that. So this is a really good age, even though you don't necessarily have a lot of wealth. It's a good age to start getting used to looking after and managing money. 5 is to seek out activities that bring you a sense of meaning and purpose. So I'm talking here about activities that you don't necessarily know why they are important to you, you just know that they are. Now if that's not your study or not your work, then I would suggest specifically seeking out new activities and trying new things until you can find things that bring that sense of meaning and purpose into your life. For me, that's things like spending time in nature and gardening, doing art, and playing guitar. And if I don't have those things in my life, then they don't provide a buffer against the other parts of my life that are perhaps more stressful. 6 is to surround yourself with good people. So build good quality relationships with your friends, nurture those relationships with your family, with your colleagues, because at some point in time you might need to call upon those people for help, and at the point at which you do call on them, the quality of the relationship is going to dictate whether or not they're actually going to be able to and willing to step up and help you at that point. 7 is to ask for help when needed. Okay, so sometimes the best solution to a problem is acknowledging that you don't actually have the answer and seeking out expertise from someone else. And there are layers of help that you can find. So it may be as simple as talking to a friend or a family member or a colleague or a peer, or you might decide that you're going to need to speak to a professional of some sort, a medical professional, or it might be someone like a lawyer or an accountant or something like that. You're going to need to seek out expertise in order to solve the problem. And there's no shame in admitting that you don't necessarily have the expertise to deal with the problem. If anything, the resilient people that I know are far more likely to reach out early to someone to get the information they need to solve the problem. And then final, number 8, is to regularly check and adjust your expectations. What I mean by that is we will all fail at some point in time. We will all get hurt at some point in time. We will all experience problems that we can't manage. And if we go through life expecting that those won't happen, they'll come as a greater shock when they do. But the balance to that is that you can grow also, and you can get better, and that you can find happiness and contentment in certain activities and in stages and phases of your life. So a term that was introduced to me a while back is realistic optimism. So you remain optimistic that you can create a better future for yourself, but you're realistic about what the boundaries of that are and the extent to which you're going to be able to create a perfect future versus one that is good enough, one that is satisfying enough, one that is rewarding enough. So yeah, 8 methods that you can kind of deploy in your life to help build resilience. If you want to learn any more about those, please follow the Student Health and Wellbeing blog. I write on that regularly, or feel free to contact me if you want me to clarify anything that I've talked about in this little video excerpt. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm going to return to my weird office with the sliding door. Cheers.
Thank you, Dr. Gareth. And remember, do check out the Student Health and Wellbeing blog and the Studyology series, which is starting online soon. And you can join for so many tips about getting that really good academic and mental wellbeing combined. Now I'm going to throw over to a couple of students who are going to tell us about what resilience means to them and how they've been coping.
For me, resilience is finding strength and the positive aspects of any difficult situation, being able to manage and adapt to an issue, continuously learning from mistakes, and achieving goals to become the best version of yourself in a sustainable way. Here's an example of where I had to be resilient. So I was working on a new assignment, but my team was discouraged because we previously did an individual assignment and we all received low grades, lower than we were expecting, and they were thinking, oh, we really couldn't improve. I really thought we could do well if we communicated clearly and allocated roles, but it was hard to get others interested and motivated. One member was also in a really bad headspace, and so then I suggested that we discuss what everyone wanted from this assignment and if we thought it would be achievable to get a high grade. It would have been easy to give up, but together we decided to apply for an extension, reallocate roles if we need to, and have more frequent meetings to help everyone manage their load. And we did end up getting a better grade, but I think this was down to resilience and really believing that we could improve despite the challenging circumstances.
So personally, my definition of resilience is your ability to bounce back from hardship or failure, or when you feel like you just aren't doing enough, or you've had a completely off day and things aren't going your way. Personally, I think resilience is your ability on those days to kind of recognize what's going on, really be self-reflective with yourself, understand what might be causing those things, and just being really patient with yourself and forgiving with yourself. So for me, I would say I've never been as stressed as I was in year 12. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I was struggling with deadlines. I was struggling with just dramas in friendships. I was having problems just within my family. There was a lot going on. And it just took a huge toll on my mental health. I was just dreading all these future plans I had to make. I didn't know if I wanted to study after high school, like midway through year 12 or towards the end even. I just did not think I was going to graduate. And I was always like a really good student. I cared about school. But this last year, it just, like, everything stopped making sense to me. I got to a point where I really did let down a lot of my standards, and I just said, okay, we just have to get it all in. We just have to graduate. We're not focusing on our ATAR, because at that point I didn't think I wanted to go to university. I used all those things as a tool to push through. In the end, I ended up actually doing really well in my schoolwork, which is surprising when I look back and like the amount of stress that I was going through, like pretty constantly through that year. But since then, I have not ever felt that stressed, because I've used that as a learning curve to really find the tools that I need to protect myself from ever getting back to that low again.
Thank you so much to Natasha and Indy. And you know, I don't even know if either of them knew it, but they've both already been implementing some of Gareth's strategies, particularly things like building good habits, deploying different kinds of coping strategies, and really importantly, readjusting expectations. As for me, I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing some mental rehearsal and really picture myself re-entering this new normal world and what kinds of differences I'm likely to encounter. I think that's really going to help me a lot. Now, next week is our final Like a Boss episode in this series. I can't believe we've come this far. It feels like we just started. And so join us to hear from some of your fellow students about how they're managing the juggle of studying online while caring for family and keeping up with work responsibilities. I remember, as always, check out the blog itself for some links to resources that we've been talking about today. And if you have any comments, you can join us on the Finding Your Way at Flinders Flow page, or you can write in the blog, and I hope to see you there.